Now, it's 20 years ago this week since Radio Caroline first threw the broadcasting establishment into disarray by beginning transmission from a ship in the North Sea. And here's a man who was there.
He's in!
Johnnie Walker!
He's on!
At the beginning of 1964, radio in this country sounded like this.
Good morning, this is the BBC Light programme. In a moment, a summary of the news and weather. Then, bright and early, half an hour of music, followed at 7 o'clock by more morning music.
And then on Easter Saturday, 1964, blasting out from a ship on the North Sea, came Britain's first and most famous pirate station, Radio Caroline.
You're tuned to Radio Caroline on 199, England's first commercial radio station and your all-day music station.
So there was no more token light program pop for a few days at the weekend. No more fading Radio Luxembourg in the evening. Now youth had the Beatles, Stones, long hair, Carnaby Street clothes, and for the first time, their very own radio station. Many of the household names we know today started with the Pirates, people like Tony Blackburn, John Peel, Kenny Everett, and Emperor Roscoe.
Titty Poppers and Finger Poppers, we're going to do the thing right here with the Emperor Roscoe on Caroline South. Emperor Roscoe da Gama, first American discoverer, like destroyer, destroyer. Ah, brush your teeth, Roscoe!
It wasn't easy running a station on the high seas, and there were many near disasters. In January 1966, the Caroline boat, the Mi Amigo, dragged its anchor in a raging storm and ended up aground on the Essex coastline. The then Labour government, of course, didn't take too kindly to this anarchy of the airwaves, especially when Caroline was joined by other stations, some on ships, some actually using old wartime forts that were standing outside territorial waters.
You're hearing things.
You're hearing things.
On wonderful Radio London.
Caroline was joined by Radios London, 270, Radio Scotland, Britain Radio, Radio England, Radio City. Despite the incredible popularity of pirate stations, the government eventually decided to introduce new laws to close them down. One by one, stations went off the air. Caroline, being the first, decided to continue, and at 12 midnight on August the 14th, I had the honor of making this announcement to an audience estimated in the region of 25 million radio listeners.
This is Radio Caroline. It is now 12 midnight. As we enter this new phase in our broadcasting history, you naturally have our assurance that we intend to stay on the air because we belong to you and we love you. Caroline continues.
Going back in time on the sounds of the nation, it's the Caroline Flashback.
In March of 1968, Caroline suddenly went off the air when the station was boarded and towed to Holland. The lady, as she's often referred to, sat in the harbour for a while, eventually was bought, went back on the air, but sadly the Mi Amigo sank in March of 1980.
Well, we're sorry to tell you that due to the severe weather conditions and also to the fact that we're shipping quite a lot of water, we're closing down and the crew are at this stage leaving the ship. Obviously, we hope to be back with you as soon as possible. From all of us, for the moment, goodbye and God bless.
I'll make her mine. Her name is Caroline.
Extraordinary scenes, Johnny. Is that boat still there, cluttering up the floor of the ocean?
It is. It's at the bottom of the ocean. I mean, we did think at one time it was actually resting on a mountainous pile of Heineken beer cans, which eventually gave way. Now, it's still there. I mean, Ronan had the idea of maybe trying to refloat it, getting money to raise the Mi Amigo and turn it into a museum. But
let's just remind ourselves, what was the reaction of the BBC to pirate radio then, particularly Radio Caroline?
Extreme jealousy, I think, at the beginning, of the huge numbers of people that we were getting listening in. And they did own up that they totally underestimated the impact that had happened from the Beatles and all those other groups. I mean, there's a whole youth explosion.
So what was the main effect then?
60s.
Presumably it sort of accelerated the process of their endorsing modern music, as it were.
Well, I mean, it has to be remembered that all those people that worked on pirate radio in those days were responsible for Radio 1 and all the stations that have happened since.
But the pirates used to live off the BBC in some rather extraordinary ways, didn't they? I mean,
Well,
you didn't have the resources of the BBC.
No, I mean, we nicked the news a bit and rewrote it and things like that.
Did they
Well, I mean,
complain
we're
about
a pirate station.
You just listened to the news on the light programme and then rebroadcast it on...
Yeah, the other time the newspapers came out and it said the BBC was very concerned that the ratings for Mrs. Dale's Diary were falling, and I thought, well, we can't have this. This isn't an institution, you know. So, and this was after the passing of the bill, so it was all highly illegal stuff. So I rebroadcast Mrs. Dale's Diary at 11 o'clock in the morning and then in the afternoon. And I thought it would be rather interesting that the entire cast of Mrs. Dale's Diary were technically liable to imprisonment under the Marine Offences Act. And Jessie Matthews, who was playing Mrs. Dale at the time, thought it was disgusting and that Johnnie Walker should be put in jail for this.
But people like yourself and all the other pirate DJs, or a lot of them, subsequently went to work for Radio 1. I mean, what was the reaction when you came ashore and came legal after having done things like that?
Well, I mean, the BBC really wanted to try and recreate the pirate sound. They nicked Radio London's jingles. It was wonderful Radio 1. There's no two ways about that, and all the offshore DJs as well. There was a policy, I think, because I stayed on into the illegal phase, that don't touch Walker for a year. So I was driving trucks and things for a year, and then eventually when I saw if I wanted to stay in radio, it had to be Radio 1, so I joined in 1969.
Do you think there's still room for more pirate radio now? I mean, there are quite a lot of...
Well, I mean, there's room for more radio. I think we should have a national commercial station equivalent of radios 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then open up a lot more local radio stations. I mean, I worked for 5 years in San Francisco, population of 4 million people with 50 radio stations. And there's no reason why London can't have at least 15 or 20 stations.
The types of pirate stations that are going at the moment, like Phoenix Radio and Radio Amanda and the Dread Broadcasting Company in London, are very particular types of music. You know, they're either punk or they're rock or the black music and soul. Do you think when cable arrives, that might possibly replace what the pirates are doing now?
No, you see, the government can move really quick. They say, right, we want cable TV. Right, let's go, you know. So we're going to have multi-channel cable TV. They're going to take until 1996 to chuck the police and ambulance and the services off FM and open up that band for radio. We could move a lot faster, and we could have a lot more legal radio stations now, giving people a lot more choice of all types of music. You know?
Thanks very much for coming along, Johnny.